For 35 years, I made Christmas happen. I baked the ham, hung the stockings, and stayed up until 3 a.m. wrapping presents. Even after my husband passed, I kept our traditions alive for our children. Until last December, when my daughter-in-law, Melanie, decided I wasn't welcome at my own family's Christmas dinner. All because of a casserole. And a secret I wasn't supposed to know. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. When I was growing up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, my mother always said that family comes first, especially during the holidays. That's why I spent 3 decades perfecting my Christmas dinner, from my grandmother's cornbread stuffing to my special cranberry orange relish that my son Brian always requested seconds of, even as a picky 10-year-old. After my husband Jack died from a heart attack 6 years ago, those family traditions became even more important to me. I'm Eleanor Parker, Ellie to my friends, and at 67, I thought I knew my place in this world. I was the matriarch of the Parker family, the Christmas dinner hostess, the grandmother who spoiled her grandkids with homemade cookies and hand-knitted sweaters. Until last December, when everything changed. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks before Christmas. I was in my kitchen preparing my shopping list for the holiday meal when my phone rang. It was Brian, my only son, calling from across town. "Mom," he said, sounding oddly formal, "Melanie and I want to host Christmas this year at our house." I gripped the edge of my countertop, feeling like the floor had just tilted beneath my feet. For 35 years, Christmas dinner had been at my house. First in the small ranch home where Brian grew up, then in the modest 2-bedroom condo I'd moved to after Jack died and I couldn't manage the mortgage payments anymore. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's different." "Melanie thinks it would be easier with the kids," Brian explained. "They have all their new toys there, and the twins have that strict nap schedule." The twins, my grandchildren Emma and Ethan, were 4 years old and absolutely precious. Melanie had always been particular about their routine, which I respected, even when it meant cutting my visits short. "Of course," I said, swallowing my disappointment. "That makes sense. What can I bring?" There was a pause on the line. "Actually, Melanie already has the menu planned. She's doing something non-traditional this year, a seafood theme." My heart sank further. No turkey, no stuffing, no cranberry. Relish? But I forced cheerfulness into my voice. "That sounds lovely, dear. Very creative." "Great," Brian said, sounding relieved. "We'll expect you around 2 then." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table feeling strangely hollow. Change is part of life, I reminded myself. Maybe it was time to pass the torch to the younger generation. In the following weeks, I threw myself into Christmas shopping for the grandkids and tried to focus on the positives. No cooking meant no cleanup. No hosting meant I could have an extra glass of wine without worrying about serving everyone. It would be fine, different, but fine. 3 days before Christmas, I was at the supermarket when I noticed they had fresh cranberries on sale. Without thinking, I tossed several bags into my cart. Old habits die hard, I suppose. By the time I got home, I had convinced myself that bringing one dish wouldn't hurt anything. My cranberry orange relish was Brian's favorite, after all. Melanie's seafood menu could surely accommodate one small bowl of festive color. The morning of Christmas Eve, I called Brian to confirm the time again. "Still 2 o'clock tomorrow?" I asked. "About that," he said, and something in his tone made my stomach clench. "Melanie's parents arrived early. They were supposed to come after Christmas, but they changed their flights." "That's nice," I said, waiting for him to continue. "The thing is, they're staying in our guest room, and things are pretty hectic here," Melanie thought. "Well, we both thought maybe it would be better if we did our gift exchange with you the day after Christmas instead." "When things are calmer." My hand tightened around the phone. You don't want me to come for Christmas dinner? It's not that we don't want you to come, Brian said quickly. It's just that with her parents here, the house is full and Melanie's stressed about the meal and the twins have been acting up. I see, I said, though I didn't. Not really. Mom, don't be upset. It's just one day and we'll see you on the 26th. I'll pick you up. We'll do presents. It'll be great. I wanted to argue, to remind him that Christmas wasn't just one day to me. It was the foundation of our family traditions, the one time of year when being together mattered most. But I could hear the tension in his voice, the unspoken plea to make this easy for him. All right, I said finally. The 26th it is. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen staring at the ingredients I'd laid out for my cranberry relish. The bright red berries, the orange I'd been about to zest, the cinnamon sticks and sugar, all suddenly useless. Christmas Eve was the longest night of my life. I heated up a frozen dinner and ate it in front of the television, watching holiday movies that only highlighted my solitude. I thought about calling my sister in Phoenix, but I couldn't bear to tell her I'd been uninvited from my own family's Christmas. Instead, I wrapped the last of the grandchildren's presents and placed them under my small artificial tree, ready for the delayed celebration. Christmas morning dawned gray and cold. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching. Neighboring families hurried to and from cars, arms laden with gifts and dishes covered in foil. My phone remained silent. No call from Brian, no FaceTime with the grandkids to watch them open their stockings, as had become our tradition in recent years. Around noon, my neighbor Patty knocked on my door, her face flushed from cooking. "Ellie, Merry Christmas," she said, handing me a plate of sugar cookies. I made too many, as usual. Thought you might like some before you head to Brian's. I accepted the plate with a tight smile. Thank you, Patty. These look delicious. What time are you heading over? She asked. I hesitated, shame washing over me. Actually, we're doing our celebration tomorrow instead. Brian's house is full with his in-laws visiting. Patty's expression shifted to one of concern. You're alone on Christmas? Nonsense. Come join us. We're eating at 4. Nothing fancy, but there's plenty of food. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition, she insisted. Jim's sister is coming with her new boyfriend, and my cousin's family is driving. Up from Chattanooga. One more won't make a difference, and nobody should be alone today. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Thank you, Patty. I'd like that very much. After she left, I set the cookies on my counter and noticed my phone flashing with a new email notification. It was from my bank, confirming a recent transaction. I opened it, expecting to see a record of yesterday's grocery shopping. Instead, I saw a payment confirmation for $6,500 to Sunset Cruise Lines. I frowned, my mind racing. I hadn't booked any cruises. Then, the memory clicked into place. Months ago, Brian had called asking if he could use my credit card for a surprise anniversary gift for Melanie. It's a 7-day Caribbean cruise, he'd explained, for our 10-year anniversary in February. I've been saving, but I'm a little short, and they're having this amazing sale that ends tonight. I'd agreed without hesitation, touched by his romantic gesture. Just send me the money when you can, I'd told him. I'll pay you back next month, Mom. Promise. But he hadn't, and I, not wanting to pressure him around the holidays, hadn't mentioned it. Now, staring at the confirmation email, something hard and unfamiliar settled in my chest. This wasn't just about Christmas dinner anymore. This was about respect, about being taken for granted, about being pushed aside by the very people I'd sacrificed for. In that moment, as the smell of cranberries I'd never cook filled my kitchen, I made a decision that would change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'm not someone who makes rash decisions. After Jack died, I managed our modest finances carefully, making sure Brian and his growing family had what they needed while securing my own retirement. I worked as a school librarian for 30 years, and budgeting became second nature to me. Every purchase was deliberate, every expense calculated. Patty's Christmas dinner was a blur of unfamiliar faces and polite conversation. Her family welcomed me warmly, but I felt like I was watching the celebration from behind glass. My phone remained silent all evening. No text from Brian. No photos of the twins opening the presents I'd sent over last week. Nothing. By the time I returned to my empty condo around 8, my sadness had hardened into something sharper. I picked up my phone and tapped on my banking app, staring at that $6,500 charge. The cost of 7 nights in the Caribbean while I sat alone on Christmas Day. I could call the cruise line. I could cancel the payment. The thought flickered through my mind like heat lightning, startling in its clarity. But no, that wasn't who I was. I needed to talk to Brian first, to understand what had happened. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for why I'd been excluded. Maybe Melanie's parents were difficult people who didn't get along with outsiders. Maybe the house really was too small for one more person. But even as these rationalizations formed, another part of my mind whispered, or maybe they just didn't want you there. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake remembering past Christmases, Brian as a little boy racing downstairs to see what Santa had brought, Jack carving the turkey with exaggerated ceremony, the 4 of us playing board games until midnight when Brian was a teenager, pretending to be too cool for family traditions but joining in anyway. When had things changed? When had I become an inconvenience? The morning of December 26th dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in the emerald green sweater Brian and Melanie had given me last Christmas, applied a touch of makeup, and waited for my son to arrive. He was 45 minutes late. "Sorry, Mom," he said, rushing through the door without meeting my eyes. "The twins didn't want to get dressed, and then Melanie's parents needed a ride to the mall for the after-Christmas sales." "That's all right," I said, picking up my purse and the bag of gifts. "How was dinner yesterday?" "Fine," he said, checking his watch. "Look, can we get going? Melanie's expecting us back by 2. Her mom's making lunch." My heart sank further. Not even enough time for a proper visit with my grandchildren. The drive to Brian's house in the suburbs was largely silent. I tried asking about his job at the accounting firm, about the twins' preschool activities, but his responses were clipped, distracted. Eventually, I gave up and stared out the window at the Christmas decorations adorning the neighborhood lawns. When we arrived, Melanie greeted me at the door with a quick, perfunctory hug. She was a slender woman with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Today, she wasn't even pretending to smile. "Eleanor," she said, stepping back quickly. "Come in. The twins are in the playroom." The house was immaculate as always. No sign that Christmas had happened just yesterday. No wrapping paper scraps. No new toys scattered about. No lingering smell of special holiday foods. It was as if the day had been tidied away along with all evidence of celebration. In the playroom, Emma and Ethan were engrossed in a tablet game, barely looking up when I entered. My heart ached at how much they'd grown since I'd last seen them, nearly 2 months ago. "Merry Christmas, my darlings," I said, kneeling down with difficulty to their level. Grandma brought presents. This got their attention. They abandoned the electronic device and hurried over, suddenly interested. As they tore into the packages, I savored their excitement, their little exclamations of delight at the hand-knitted sweaters and the educational games I'd selected. "What do you say to Grandma?" Brian prompted from the doorway. "Thank you," they chorused, already distracted by the toys. "Would you like to see what Santa brought them?" Melanie asked, her tone implying this was a formality rather than a genuine invitation. "I'd love to," I said, rising to my feet with a slight wince. My knees weren't what they used to be. She led me to a corner of the family room where an enormous pile of expensive toys was arranged. A miniature electric car the children could actually drive. A child-sized kitchen set that probably cost more than my real kitchen appliances. Electronic gadgets whose purpose I couldn't even determine. Wow, I said, genuinely impressed. Santa was very generous this year. Well, the kids only get one childhood, Melanie said with a shrug. We want it to be magical. So did I thought. But magic doesn't come from the price tag. We moved to the dining room where Melanie's parents were already seated. Howard and Diane Thompson were both tall, well-dressed, and wearing identical expressions of mild disinterest. I'd met them, perhaps, 5 times over the years, always at major events like the twins' baptism or birthday parties. Eleanor, Howard acknowledged with a nod. Merry Christmas. You too, I replied. I hope you had a lovely dinner yesterday. Melanie outdid herself, Diane said, patting her daughter's hand. The lobster thermidor was restaurant quality. I'm sure it was wonderful, I said, pushing away the mental image of the frozen TV dinner I'd eaten alone. Lunch was a tense affair. Conversation revolved around the Thompsons' country club membership, their recent renovation of their vacation home in Hilton Head, and Melanie's ongoing feud with another mother at the twins' exclusive preschool. I sat quietly, feeling increasingly invisible. After we'd eaten, Brian stood up abruptly. Mom brought gifts for everyone, he announced, as if completing a task on a checklist. I distributed the presents I'd carefully selected: a cashmere scarf for Melanie, golf accessories for Brian, and tasteful scarves for Howard and Diane. The Thompsons handed me a gift bag in return, which contained a generic bath set that still had the clearance sticker partially visible on the bottom. Thank you, I said anyway. That's very thoughtful. As Brian began clearing the dishes, I noticed a travel brochure on the sideboard. Caribbean Dreams, Your Ultimate Anniversary Escape, blazed across the top in bright lettering. Are you planning a trip? I asked Melanie, nodding toward the brochure. She glanced at Brian, who suddenly became very interested in stacking plates. Yes. Actually, she said, a genuine smile appearing for the first time. We're doing a cruise for our anniversary in February. 7 nights, 3 islands, no kids, no responsibilities. Sounds wonderful, I said, watching Brian's back as he carried dishes to the kitchen. Special occasions deserve special celebrations. Mom and Dad are taking the twins for the week, Melanie continued. It's going to be amazing. We've been saving up forever. Have you? I asked mildly. Something in my tone must have alerted her, because her smile faltered. Well, Brian's been putting money aside. It was supposed to be a surprise, but he's terrible at keeping secrets. She laughed lightly. Yes, he always has been, I agreed. Even as a little boy, he could never hide anything from me for long. Brian returned from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Mom, I hate to cut this short, but the twins have a playdate at 4 and we need to get them ready. It wasn't even 3 o'clock. Of course, I said, rising from my chair. I understand. As I gathered my things, Diane leaned toward her daughter. Don't forget we need to finalize those shore excursions tonight. The good ones sell out fast. I know, Mom, Melanie said. I've got the credit card ready to go. My son drove me home, in the same strained silence that had characterized our earlier trip. As we pulled up to my condo building, I turned to face him. Brian, I said quietly, what happened to Christmas dinner? He sighed heavily. Mom, don't start. It was just easier. With Melanie's parents there. Without me, I finished for him. It was easier without me. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? I asked. Be honest with me, Brian. Did Melanie not want me there? He gripped the steering wheel tighter. It's not that simple. Her parents are particular. and you and Melanie have never really. Never. Really what? Connected, he finished lamely. You're just different people. So different that there wasn't room for me at Christmas dinner? The dinner I hosted for 35 years? Mom, please. It's not personal. But it was. It was deeply, painfully personal. And the cruise? I asked. The one you put on my credit card 3 months ago and promised to pay back? Brian's face flushed. I'm going to pay you back. Things have been tight with the holidays, but I'll get you the money soon. When? I pressed. Before or after you book those shore excursions Diane mentioned? You're being unfair, he said, his voice hardening. I've never missed a payment before. And I've never missed a Christmas with my family before, I countered. Things change, I guess. I got out of the car before he could respond, my heart pounding. As I walked toward my building, I heard his window roll down. Mom, he called after. Me. Don't make this into something it's not. I turned back, studying my son's face, Jack's strong jawline, my mother's eyes, and felt a deep sadness wash over me. I'm not making it into anything, Brian. I'm just finally seeing it for what it is. That night, a winter storm rolled in. I sat by my window watching snow blanket the parking lot of my condo complex, sipping tea and trying to quiet the turmoil in my mind. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the silence more pronounced. I'd lived alone for 6 years since Jack passed, but I'd never felt truly lonely until now. My phone sat on the coffee table, screen dark. No call from Brian, no apology, no acknowledgement of how much it hurt to be excluded from a day that had defined my life for decades. I picked up the phone and dialed my sister Kate in Phoenix. We weren't as close as we once had been. Distance and different life paths had created a gentle drift between us. But if anyone would understand, it would be Kate. She answered on the third ring, the sound of laughter and music in the background. Ellie, Merry Christmas! Hold on, let me move somewhere quieter. The noise faded, and Kate's voice came back clear. Sorry about that. The grandkids are putting on a talent show. How are you? How was Christmas with Brian and the family? I hesitated, then decided there was no point in pretending. I wasn't invited. What? Kate's shock was evident even through the phone. What? Do you mean you weren't invited? Melanie's parents came to town unexpectedly, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Apparently there wasn't room for me. That's ridiculous, Kate said firmly. It's Christmas, for heaven's sake, and you're his mother. I know. The tears I'd been holding back all day finally spilled over. I don't understand, Kate. When did I become an afterthought? My sister was quiet for a moment. Have things been tense between you and Melanie lately? I considered the question. Melanie and I had never been close, but I'd always tried to respect boundaries and not interfere in their marriage. I'd never been the meddling mother-in-law stereotype. At least I didn't think I had. Not particularly, I said. We've never had much in common, but I've always been polite, supportive. And Brian? Has he seemed distant? He's been busy, I admitted. Work, the twins, their social obligations. I don't see him as often as I'd like, but that's normal, isn't it? Adult children have their own lives. Kate sighed. Yes, but they don't exclude their parents from family holidays without a reason. Something else is going on here, Ellie. She was right. And deep down, I knew what it was. I just hadn't wanted to face it. There's more, I said, and told her about the cruise charge on my credit card, the unopened presents I'd sent over for the twins, the way Melanie's parents had been invited for an extended stay while I was shuffled in and out for a perfunctory post-Christmas lunch. Oh, Ellie, Kate breathed when I'd finished. I'm so sorry. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to confront Brian. Another part just wants to pretend it didn't happen. Keep the peace. And what does that get you? Kate asked gently. More of the same? Probably. Listen to me, she said, her voice taking on the big sister tone I remembered from childhood. You've spent your whole life putting others first. Jack, Brian, those kids at the school where you worked. When was the last time you stood up for yourself? I couldn't remember. It's not about punishing Brian, Kate continued. It's about setting boundaries, letting him know his behavior isn't acceptable. And how do I do that? Start by taking care of yourself first. Cancel that cruise payment if you want to. You certainly have the right. But more importantly, stop being so available. Stop being the backup plan. After we hung up, I sat with Kate's words echoing in my mind. She was right. For too long, I'd accepted whatever scraps of time and attention my son was willing to give me. I'd overlooked thoughtlessness, made excuses for neglect, and retreated further into the background of their lives. But I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't an obligation to be fulfilled when convenient. I was Eleanor Parker, and I deserved better. I picked up my phone again and opened my banking app. With steady fingers, I navigated to the recent transactions, found the $6,500 payment to Sunset Cruise Lines, and selected Dispute Charge. A warning message appeared. Are you sure you want to dispute this charge? This will temporarily remove the funds from the merchant. I stared at the screen for a long moment. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about consequences, about finally standing up for myself after years of quiet accommodation. I tapped confirm. A weight lifted from my shoulders immediately, replaced by a strange light sensation I barely recognized: liberation. I hadn't felt this free since Jack died, and I realized, with equal parts grief and wonder, that I was answerable only to myself for the first time in my adult life. I slept deeply that night, no longer troubled by the silent phone or the empty house. When I woke the next morning, I felt clear-headed and purposeful. The storm had passed, leaving behind a glittering landscape of pristine snow. I made myself a proper breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, and sat down to create a plan. If I was going to reclaim my life, I needed to be deliberate about it. First, I called Patty next door. I need your help with something, I said when she answered. Do you still have that nephew who's good with computers? Zach? Sure do. He's home from college for the break. What do you need? An hour later, Zach was sitting at my kitchen table, setting up my laptop with new social media accounts. At 20, he had the patient demeanor of someone used to explaining technology to older relatives. So, you want Facebook, Instagram, and... he asked, fingers flying over the keyboard. What else do people use these days? I asked. He thought for a moment. TikTok is huge, but that's more for videos. Maybe Twitter? Or Pinterest if you're into crafts or cooking. Let's start with Facebook and Instagram, I decided. I can add others later if I need to. As Zach worked, I explained what I wanted to do. Not the personal details about Brian and Melanie, that would stay private, but my broader plan to reconnect with old friends, join community groups, and build a social circle independent of my son and his family. That's awesome, Mrs. P, Zach said, genuinely enthusiastic. My grandma did something similar after my grandpa died. She's in like 3 book clubs now and has more friends than I do. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'd focused so much on being a mother and grandmother that I'd neglected being Eleanor. That would change starting today. After Zach left, I spent the afternoon creating my new online presence. I uploaded a recent photo Patty had taken of me at her Christmas dinner, filled out my profile with my interests, gardening, classic literature, baking, and began searching for old friends and colleagues. To my surprise, many were already online. My former teaching assistant from the school library, my walking buddy from when Jack and I lived in the old neighborhood, even my college roommate whom I hadn't spoken to in nearly 20 years. One by one, I sent friend requests and short messages. It's been too long. I'd love to reconnect. By evening, responses were already coming in, warm and welcoming. Where have you been hiding, Ellie? So good to hear from you. Let's meet for coffee soon. I've thought about you often over the years. Say yes to lunch next week? I was smiling so much my cheeks hurt. This, I realized, was what I'd been missing. Not just family connection, but a wider web of relationships. People who chose to have me in their lives rather than including me out of obligation. My phone rang around 8 o'clock that evening. Brian's number flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Hello? Mom? His voice was tight with anger. What did you do? You'll need to be more specific, Brian, I said calmly. The cruise payment. The credit card company reversed the charge. Melanie just got an email saying our booking is canceled. What the hell? Ah, that, I said. Yes, I disputed the charge. Without talking to me first? He sounded incredulous. Mom, that cruise is non-refundable. If we don't get the payment sorted out immediately, we'll lose our reservation completely. That's unfortunate, I replied, surprised by my own composure. But I'm sure you can figure something out. Perhaps ask Melanie's parents for a loan? They seem quite comfortable financially. There was stunned silence on the other end of the line. When Brian spoke again, his voice had dropped to a near whisper. Is this because we didn't invite you for Christmas dinner? Are you seriously that petty? The accusation stung, but I held firm. This isn't about Christmas dinner, Brian. It's about a pattern of behavior. You put a large charge on my credit card, promised to pay it back next month, and then didn't. That's called taking advantage. I told you things have been tight. Not too tight for a 7-day Caribbean cruise, apparently, I interrupted. Not too tight for whatever extravagant gifts the twins received from Santa. This isn't about money, Brian. It's about respect. And frankly, I haven't been feeling very respected lately. His response was immediate and defensive. That's not fair. I've always been there for you. Have you? I asked quietly. When was the last time you called just to check on me? When was the last time you invited me over without me having to ask? When was the last time you remembered that I might be lonely, especially during the holidays? The he. Silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Mom, this is crazy, Brian finally said, his voice shifting from defensive to placating. Look, I know Christmas was a mess. Melanie shouldn't have changed plans last minute, but canceling our anniversary trip? That's going too far. I curled, my feet beneath me on the sofa, watching the snow through my window. Is it? I think it's simply a natural consequence. You broke your promise to repay me, so the payment was canceled. I'll pay you back. I always planned to pay you back. The edge of panic in his voice told me he'd already made promises to Melanie that he couldn't keep without my help. When? I asked calmly. The payment was due 3 months ago, Brian. You haven't mentioned it once in all that time, he exhaled sharply. Things have been tight. The twins' preschool raised tuition again, and we've had extra expenses with holiday entertaining and yet you found money for a seafood Christmas dinner and extravagant presents, I pointed out. It's about priorities, Brian. And I'm clearly not one of yours. That's not fair, he said again, but with less conviction. Look, if you reinstate the payment, I swear I'll have the money to you next week. All of it. I considered this. 3 months of silence about the debt. Yet, suddenly he could find $6,500 within a week? The realization that he could have paid me all along but chose not to was its own kind of revelation. I'm sorry, Brian, but my answer is no. You'll need to make other arrangements. Mom! His voice rose in disbelief. You can't do this. Melanie has been planning this trip for months. She'll be devastated. Something in me shifted at those words. Melanie would be devastated about missing a cruise, but not about excluding her mother-in-law from Christmas? Not about leaving me alone on a day she knew was sacred to me? I'm sorry she'll be disappointed, I said, and I genuinely was. I took no pleasure in Melanie's distress, despite everything. But perhaps this will be a valuable lesson for both of you about keeping your word. This isn't like you, Brian said, his tone accusatory. You've never been vindictive before. This isn't vindictiveness, Brian. It's self-respect. There's a difference. After we hung up, I expected to feel guilty or uncertain. Instead, I felt remarkably calm. I had drawn a line, and for once, I wasn't erasing it to accommodate others. I made myself another cup of tea and continued exploring my new social media accounts. Friend requests were pouring in, along with invitations to join local groups. Gardening club that met at the community center, a book discussion group at the library where I used to work, a walking group for seniors that gathered 3 mornings a week at the nearby park. The world was suddenly opening up again, offering possibilities beyond the narrow role I'd confined myself to. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian. Melanie is in tears. Hope you're happy. I set the phone aside without responding. Emotional manipulation had worked on me for years, but not tonight. Tonight, I was discovering that backbone I'd forgotten I had. The next morning, I woke to an email from Melanie. The subject line read, "What you've done." I opened it with steady hands. "Eleanor, I don't understand how you could be so cruel." This cruise was going to be the first real vacation Brian and I have had since the twins were born. We've been planning it for a year. My parents gave us spending money for Christmas to make it special. Now everything is ruined because you're upset about a dinner invitation? You're acting like a spoiled child. The email continued for several more paragraphs, alternating between guilt trips and thinly veiled accusations. One line in particular stood out. Brian has always said you were the most selfless person he knew. I guess he was wrong. I closed the email without replying. There was nothing I could say that would make Melanie understand my perspective. In her world, I existed solely to support her family, financially, emotionally, practically, without expectations of reciprocity. Instead, I got dressed and headed out to meet Patty for coffee at the small cafe around the corner. The sidewalks were still icy from the storm, forcing me to walk slowly and carefully. As I approached the cafe, I spotted Patty waving enthusiastically through the window. "There she is," she called as I entered, pulling off my gloves. "The social media queen herself. You've been busy." I laughed, settling into the chair across from her. "I'm not sure about queen, but yes, it's been quite an adventure." Patty slid a steaming mug toward me. "I ordered you a vanilla latte. Hope that's okay." "Perfect," I said, warming my hands around the cup. "Thank you for meeting me, especially on such short notice." "Are you kidding? I'm thrilled you called. And even more thrilled about this new leaf you're turning. It's about time, Ellie." "What do you mean?" She gave me a knowing look. "I've watched you pour everything into Brian and his family for years. Don't get me wrong, being devoted to your kid is admirable, but there's a difference between devotion and… what's the word I'm looking for? Doormat?" I suggested wryly. Patty laughed. "I would never have said it, but yes, there's supporting your family, and then there's letting them walk all over you. I've been worried about you." "I didn't realize it was so obvious," I admitted. "To an outsider? Crystal clear. The way they include you only when it's convenient. The way you drop everything whenever they call. The way you make excuses for them when they treat you poorly." She paused, looking concerned. "I hope I'm not overstepping." "Not at all," I assured her. "I needed to hear this. Honestly, I think I've known it for a while. I just couldn't bring myself to acknowledge it." Patty nodded sympathetically. "So what happened? What finally made you say enough?" I told her about the Christmas exclusion, the cruise payment, and my decision to cancel it. As I spoke, I realized how liberating it felt to share the truth without shame or defensiveness. "Good for you," Patty said firmly when I'd finished. "It's hard to set boundaries with family. They know exactly which buttons to push." Brian texted. "Last night saying Melanie is in tears," I confessed. "Part of me still feels terrible about that." "Of course you do. You're a kind person. But think about it this way. How many tears have you shed over their behavior? Who comforted you when you were alone on Christmas Day?" She had a point. No one had considered my feelings when decisions were being made. No one had worried about leaving me alone during the holidays. "So what's next?" Patty asked, stirring her coffee. "You've made your stand. What happens now?" It was a good question. I hadn't thought beyond the immediate situation with the cruise. Payment. What did I want my relationship with Brian and his family to look like going forward? "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't want to cut them off completely. They're still my family, and I love them, despite everything. But I can't go back to the way things were." "Then don't," Patty said simply. "Build your life without making them the center of it. When they realize you're no longer at their beck and call, they'll either adjust or they won't. Either way, you'll be okay." Her confidence was contagious. For the first time, I truly believed I would be okay, regardless of what Brian and Melanie decided to do. After coffee, we walked to the community center together. The senior center was hosting an art class that afternoon, and Patty had signed us both up. "I can't draw to save my life," I protested as we approached the building. "Neither can I," Patty replied cheerfully. "But Sandra Mills is teaching, and she's wonderful. Plus, there's wine." The community center was warm and inviting, buzzing with activity. In the main hall, tables were set up with easels and art supplies. About 15 people, mostly women around my age, were chatting and laughing as they donned aprons and arranged their materials. Sandra, a vivacious woman in her 60s, with a shock of silver hair, greeted us at the door. "Welcome, welcome. Find any seat you like. We're doing winter landscapes today, perfect for beginners." As I settled at a table near the window, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find a slender woman with kind eyes and a bright scarf. "Aren't you Eleanor Parker?" she asked. "The school librarian from Lincoln Elementary?" I nodded, trying to place her face. "I'm Margaret Wilson," she said. "My son Daniel was in your reading group about 12 years ago. The one for kids who struggled with dyslexia?" Of course, memory clicked into place. Daniel with the red hair and the dinosaur obsession? "How is he?" Margaret beamed. "He just finished his first semester at State, studying paleontology, if you can believe it." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. "I always knew he'd go far once he found the right tools for reading." He says. "You changed his life," Margaret said earnestly. "When the other teachers wanted to hold him back, you fought for him. Got him that specialized program. He never forgot that." Warmth spread through my chest. I was just doing my job. "No," Margaret shook her head firmly. "You went above and beyond. Most people did the minimum. You saw what he could be, not just what he was struggling with." As Margaret spoke about her son, a memory surfaced. Daniel hunched over a book, frustrated tears threatening to spill, his small fists clenched in determination. I'd stayed after hours for weeks to work with him, researching methods that might help when traditional approaches failed. Not because it was my job, but because I couldn't bear to see a child's spirit crushed by something as fundamental as reading. "Would you like to sit together?" Margaret asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "I'd love to," I replied, moving my supplies to her table. The art class was surprisingly enjoyable. Sandra was a patient teacher, guiding us through basic techniques with humor and encouragement. My winter landscape looked nothing like the example, but I didn't care. The joy was in the process, mixing colors, making mistakes, laughing with new friends. By the end of the class, I'd exchanged numbers. With Margaret and 2 other women, We made plans to meet for the next session the following week. As Patty and I walked home, snow beginning to fall lightly around us, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. See? Patty nudged me playfully. Life goes on, even when family disappoints you. You were right, I admitted. I needed this. When I checked my phone that evening, there were 3 missed calls from Brian and another text. We need to talk, in person, tomorrow. I texted back, I have plans tomorrow. How about Friday at 11? We can meet at Rosie's Cafe. His response came, quickly. This can't wait until Friday. I'm afraid it will have to, I replied. I have commitments. It wasn't exactly a lie. I had committed to myself, to honor my own needs, to create boundaries, to no longer drop everything when Brian called. The fact that my actual plans involved a senior center book club meeting rather than something he would consider important was beside the point. After a long pause, he responded, Fine. Friday at 11. I slept well that night and woke Thursday. Morning feeling refreshed. The book club meeting exceeded my expectations. We discussed Jane Austen's Persuasion, a novel about a woman who gets a second chance at happiness after years of putting others first. The irony wasn't lost on me. During a break, I struck up a conversation with Martin, a retired English professor with kind eyes and a quick wit. When he learned I'd been a school librarian, his face lit up. The unsung heroes of education, he declared. Librarians shaped my life far more than most of my teachers did. We try our best, I said, pleased by his appreciation. Are you still working? He asked. No, I retired 3 years ago. Do you miss it? The question caught me off guard. Did I miss it? The busy days, the curious children, the satisfaction of connecting the right book with the right reader at the right moment? Yes, I admitted. Very much. Martin nodded thoughtfully. I volunteer at the Children's Hospital twice a week, reading to kids in the long-term care ward. They're always looking for more volunteers, especially those with a background in children's literature. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of professional purpose. That sounds wonderful. How would I get involved? By the time I left the book club, I had Martin's contact information and details about the volunteer program. The idea of sharing books with children again filled me with quiet excitement. Not just a way to fill time, but a meaningful contribution only I could make. Friday morning arrived with a fresh dusting of snow. I dressed carefully for my meeting with Brian, not to impress him, but to remind myself of my own worth. A deep blue sweater that brought out my eyes, silver earrings Jack had given me on our last anniversary, a touch of lipstick. Rosie's Cafe was bustling when I arrived at 10:50. I chose a table by the window, ordered a pot of tea, and waited. At check-in. 11:15, Brian rushed in, looking harried and slightly unkempt, as if he'd dressed in a hurry. Sorry I'm late, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. The twins wouldn't get in the car, and then traffic was a nightmare. It's fine, I said, pouring him a cup of tea. How are you? He blinked, clearly surprised by my composure. How am I? Mom, our cruise was canceled. Melanie is devastated. I had to scramble to get a last-minute loan from her father, which came with a lecture about financial responsibility. How do you think I am? I added a splash of milk to my tea, taking my time before responding. I'm sorry it's been difficult, but I'm glad you found a solution. That's it? You're sorry it's been difficult? His voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. Brian, I said quietly, I understand you're upset. But I didn't create this situation. You put a large charge on my card without permission to pay me back. You didn't. Actions have consequences. I was going to pay you back, he insisted. You know I'm good for it. Do I? I asked, genuinely curious. Based on what evidence? stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Based on the fact that I'm your son, that should count for something. It does count for something. It's why I agreed to let you use my card in the first place, despite my reservations. But being my son doesn't give you the right to take advantage of me. Brian ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. I don't understand what's happened to you. You've never been like this before. Like what, exactly? So hard. Unforgiving. I considered this. Was I being hard? Unforgiving? Or was I simply refusing to be the path of least resistance any longer? I haven't changed, Brian. I'm still the same woman who raised you, who loves you more than you can possibly understand. What's changed is that I'm no longer willing to be an afterthought in your life. That's not fair, he protested. You're not an afterthought. Aren't I? I leaned forward, holding his gaze. Tell me honestly, if Melanie's parents hadn't come to town, would I have been included in Christmas dinner? He hesitated just a fraction too long. Of course. Please. Don't lie to me, I said softly. I deserve better than that. Brian's shoulders sagged. It's complicated, Mom. Melanie and her parents, they have certain expectations about holidays, traditions of their own. And there's no room in those traditions for your mother? He fidgeted with his napkin. Melanie feels like you. Judge her. That you're always comparing her to how you would do things. This was news to me. I'd gone out of my way to avoid offering unsolicited advice to praise Melanie's parenting choices even when they differed from what I would have done. I've never judged her, I said carefully. I've respected both of your choices as parents, as partners. When have I ever criticized Melanie? Brian shifted uncomfortably. It's not always what you say. It's looks, sighs. She feels it. Feels what exactly? That you think she's not good enough, that she's doing everything wrong. I sat back, genuinely shocked. Brian, that's simply not true. I've always supported you both. I've minded my own business, helped when asked, stayed away when not wanted. See, that's the kind of thing. He pointed accusingly. Stayed away when not wanted. Like we're deliberately excluding you all the time. Aren't you? I asked quietly. Like at Christmas? He had no response to that. I sighed, feeling suddenly tired. Brian, I don't want to fight with you. I don't want to be at odds with Melanie. All I want is to be treated with basic consideration and respect, to be included in family celebrations, to not have my financial boundaries ignored. So what are you saying? What do you want from us now? It was a fair question. What did I want? Not groveling apologies or dramatic promises, just acknowledgement, understanding, change. I want you to see me, I said simply. Not just as a convenience or an obligation, but as a person with feelings, with a life of my own. I want you to consider how your decisions affect me before you make them, not after I've been hurt. Brian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was subdued. I never meant to hurt you, Mom. I just got caught up in my own life, I guess. Melanie, the kids, work, it's a lot. I know it is, I said gently. And I don't expect to be your priority. I just don't want to be an afterthought. He nodded slowly. I understand. And about the money isn't the point, I interrupted. It never was. It was about respect. Still, I want to make it right. I'll pay you back. Every cent. I appreciate that. But more importantly, I want us to rebuild our relationship. On healthier terms. As we continued talking, something shifted between us. The defensiveness gradually melted away, replaced by genuine communication. For the first time in years, Brian seemed to really hear me, to see me as someone separate from his needs and expectations. When we finally parted, he hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry, Mom. For everything." "I know," I said, hugging him back. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." Walking home through the gently falling snow, I felt cautiously optimistic. Not because everything was magically fixed. Real change would take time and consistent effort. But because for once, I had spoken my truth and been heard. My phone pinged with a notification. Martin from the book club had sent details about the hospital volunteer orientation next Tuesday. New possibilities were unfolding, right alongside the healing of old wounds. I looked up at the winter sky, pale blue and infinite. At 67, my life wasn't ending. It was expanding in directions I never could have imagined. The following Tuesday, I arrived at Children's Hospital for volunteer orientation with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The sprawling medical complex was intimidating at first, all sterile corridors and busy staff hurrying past, but the pediatric wing had been transformed into something magical. Colorful murals of forests and oceans covered the walls. Mobile displays hung from ceilings. Even the nurses' station was decorated to look like a treehouse. Martin was waiting in the volunteer lounge, his face brightening when he saw me. "Eleanor, you made it." "I wouldn't miss it," I assured him, hanging up my coat. "Though I must admit, I'm a bit nervous." "Everyone is at first," he said kindly. "But trust me, once you start reading to these kids, everything else falls away." The volunteer coordinator, a brisk woman named Diane, led us through the training, hospital protocols, confidentiality rules, infection control procedures. There was more to learn than I'd anticipated. But when she described our actual duties, my confidence returned. This was familiar territory, selecting age-appropriate books, creating engaging story times, offering comfort through literature. "Some of our patients are here for a day or two," Diane explained. "Others for months. Your consistent presence becomes an anchor for them, something normal and nurturing in an otherwise clinical environment." We toured the wards afterward, meeting children of various ages with different medical conditions. Some were shy, others immediately curious about the new book lady. A 7-year-old girl with leukemia showed me her collection of stuffed unicorns. A teenage boy recovering from surgery asked if I knew any books with dragons that aren't babyish. By the time I left, I'd signed up for 2 regular shifts per week and had a list of books to order online for my first official story time. "You're a natural," Martin said as we walked to the parking lot. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched. "It feels good to have a purpose again." "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" he asked suddenly. Not just to discuss volunteering, but to talk, get to know each other better. I felt a flicker of warmth that had nothing to do with the winter sun. I'd like that very much. Driving home, I realized I hadn't checked my phone all morning. When I finally did, I found a text from Brian. "Melanie wants to meet with you. Just the 2 of you? Please?" My good mood faltered. A private meeting with Melanie could only be uncomfortable at best, hostile at worst. My instinct was to decline, to protect my newfound peace. But avoidance wouldn't solve anything in the long run. "When and where?" I texted back. His response came quickly. "Tomorrow at 1 p.m.? She suggested that little tea room you like on Maple Street, the IR. Fact that Melanie remembered I liked lavender and lace tea room was surprising. We'd gone there only once 3 years ago for Mother's Day. The twins had been barely a year old, and Melanie had been distracted and tense the entire time, checking her watch repeatedly. Not exactly a cherished memory. "I'll be there," I replied. That night, I called Kate for moral support. "Melanie wants to meet one-on-one," I told her. "I'm not sure what to expect." "Be prepared for anything," my sister advised. "She might apologize. She might blame you for everything. She might try to manipulate you into reinstating that cruise payment." "What should I do?" "Listen first," Kate said wisely. "Let her show her cards before you show yours. But no matter What? Don't agree to anything on the spot. Tell her you need time to think about whatever she proposes. When did you get so strategic? I asked, impressed. Kate laughed. 3 divorces and 5 grandchildren will teach you a thing or two about family dynamics. The next day, I arrived at the tea room 15 minutes early, selecting a quiet table in the corner. The space was charming. Floral chintz upholstery, delicate porcelain teacups, the scent of freshly baked scones permeating the air. I ordered a pot of Earl Grey and waited. Melanie walked in precisely at 1 o'clock, looking polished as always in a camel coat and designer boots. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on me with an unreadable expression. As she approached my table, I noticed the slight strain around her mouth, the careful composure that suggested effort. "Eleanor," she said, removing her coat and scarf, "thank you for meeting me." "Of course," I replied, pouring her a cup of tea. "Would you like something to eat? The lemon scones are wonderful." "No, thank you." She sat rigidly, hands folded on the table. "I prefer to get straight to the point." I nodded, setting down the teapot. "I'm listening." Melanie drew a deep breath. "Brian says you felt excluded at Christmas, that you were hurt by not being invited to dinner." Her phrasing was telling. Not, "I'm sorry we hurt you," but "you felt excluded," placing the emphasis on my feelings rather than their actions. "Yes," I said simply. "I was hurt." She shifted uncomfortably. "My parents' visit was unexpected. They were supposed to come after New Year's, but my father had a business trip rescheduled. It was chaotic." "I understand last-minute changes happen," I said carefully. "What I don't understand is why that meant I couldn't be included." Melanie's fingers tightened around her teacup. "You know how my mother can be. She has very specific ideas about how holidays should be conducted. The menu, the timing, everything. She gets difficult when things don't go her way." "I see," I said, though I didn't, not really. "And my presence would have disrupted her plans?" "It's complicated." Melanie avoided my gaze. "My parents have certain expectations about family dynamics. They believe a married couple should establish their own traditions, separate from both sets of parents." "Both sets?" I asked pointedly. "Yet your parents were there." A flush crept up her neck. "That's different. They were visiting from out of town." The double standard was so blatant, I almost laughed. Instead, I took a sip of tea, gathering my thoughts. "Melanie, we've known each other for 12 years. In all that time, have I ever tried to impose my traditions on your family? Have I ever criticized your choices or demanded things be done my way?" She hesitated. "Not explicitly, no." "What does that mean?" "It means you have a way of, I don't know, making me feel judged without saying anything directly. A look here, a sigh there. Brian always defends you, says I'm imagining things, but I know what I feel." So Brian had been telling the truth about that at least. Melanie genuinely believed I disapproved of her, despite my conscious efforts to be supportive. "I'm sorry you felt that way," I said honestly. "It was never my intention to make you feel judged. I've always respected your role as the twins, mother and Brian's wife." "Really?" Her tone was skeptical. "Because it often feels like you're comparing me to some ideal in your head. The way you would have done things." "Melanie," I said gently, "I raised one child 40 years ago in a completely different world. I have no illusions that my methods would work for your family, or that they were even perfect then. I've never thought less of you for making different choices." She studied my face, seeming to search for deception. "Brian says you were always the perfect mother, patient, creative, never too busy or too tired for him. Do you know how impossible that is to live up to?" Suddenly, many things began to make sense. Melanie's defensiveness, her need to establish territory, her resistance to my involvement in family life. She wasn't rejecting me personally. She was protecting herself from perceived judgment. Is that what this has been about? You think Brian compares you to some idealized version of me? I shook my head, smiling sadly. Melanie, I was far from perfect. I lost my temper. I made mistakes. There were days I counted the minutes until bedtime because I was so exhausted. Brian only remembers the good parts because that's what children do when they look back. He never sees my struggles, she said, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. Just the ways I fall short. Have you told him how you feel? She shrugged. He wouldn't understand. His childhood sounds like something from a Hallmark movie the way he describes it. Christmas was always perfect. You never argued. Every day was filled with homemade cookies and profound life lessons. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Good Lord, no wonder you resent me. I wouldn't want to compete with that fictional paragon either. After a moment, Melanie's lips twitched into a reluctant smile. She does sound insufferable. Completely, I agreed. Nothing like the real flawed woman sitting across from you now. Something subtle shifted in the air between us. Not reconciliation exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. I should have included you at Christmas, Melanie admitted finally. Regardless of my parents' views or my own insecurities, it was wrong to leave you alone on a holiday. Thanks. You for saying that, I said, genuinely touched by her honesty. And I should have communicated more directly when I felt hurt, rather than reacting the way I did. About that, Melanie hesitated. The cruise payment. Is there any way? I can't reinstate it, I said gently but firmly. Brian has already arranged alternative financing through your father. Yes, but with interest rates and conditions attached, she said, frustration evident. It's not the same. I understand that's disappointing, I acknowledged. But the issue was never really about the cruise itself. It was about respecting my financial boundaries and keeping promises. Melanie nodded slowly. I suppose that's fair. She paused, then added with surprising candor. I wasn't involved in the financial arrangement, you know. Brian handled it. I didn't even know he'd put it on your card until after the fact. This was new information. I'd assumed they'd planned it together. I see. Don't misunderstand. I was thrilled about the cruise. I just would have preferred he save up for it honestly rather than borrowing the money from you or anyone else. She sighed. We don't always communicate well about finances. I considered this, seeing Melanie in a slightly different light. Perhaps she wasn't as calculating as I'd imagined. Perhaps she, too, was struggling to navigate complex family dynamics while maintaining her own sense of identity and control, and now. I make a suggestion? I offered tentatively. Not as a mother-in-law, but as someone who's lived a bit longer and made plenty of mistakes along the way. She regarded me cautiously. What kind of suggestion? Talk to Brian. Tell him how you feel. About being compared to an idealized version of me. Tell him your concerns about finances. Create the relationship you want, not the one you think he expects. That's easier said than done, she murmured. Of course it is, I agreed. Most worthwhile things are, but the alternative is years of silent resentment and misunderstandings. Trust me, I've been down that road. It leads nowhere good. Melanie was quiet for a long moment. I'll think about it, she said finally. Then, with evident effort, she added, Would you like to come for dinner next Sunday? Just a regular family dinner, nothing special. But the twins miss you. The olive branch was small, but significant. I'd like that very much, I said. Sunday dinner at Brian and Melanie's was different, from what I expected. Gone was the formal dining room setup with its elaborate place settings and tension-filled atmosphere. Instead, we ate in the kitchen, Melanie's pristine, magazine-worthy kitchen that I'd rarely been allowed to enter before. The twins sat on booster seats. Brian carved a simple roast chicken, and Melanie moved around the space with casual confidence. Emma, show Grandma what you made at preschool, Melanie prompted as she served steamed vegetables. Emma's face lit up. She scrambled down from her seat and returned with a lumpy clay creation painted in vibrant colors. "It's a unicorn," she announced proudly. I examined the sculpture with exaggerated seriousness. "A magnificent unicorn," I agreed. "I especially love the rainbow mane." "I made a dinosaur, but it broke," Ethan said solemnly. "Miss Kelly tried to fix it, but its head fell off." "The tragic fate of many dinosaurs," I said, making him giggle. The conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. We talked about the twins' preschool adventures, Brian's new project at work, neighborhood, gossip, ordinary family topics, without the undercurrent of judgment that had previously characterized our gatherings. When the twins ran off to play after dinner, Brian began clearing the table. I instinctively rose to help, but Melanie surprised me. "Eleanor, why don't you go relax in the living room? Brian and I will clean up." In the past, I would have insisted on helping, viewing the suggestion as a polite dismissal. This time, I recognized it for what it was, a genuine attempt to treat me as a guest, not household help. "Thank you," I said, taking my wine glass with me. From the living room, I could hear them in the kitchen, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversation, occasional laughter. They moved around each other with the easy choreography of a long-married couple, anticipating movements, passing items without words. I felt a pang of memory. Jack and I had been like that once, so in tune with each other that we barely needed to speak. After raising Brian and building a life together for 38 years, we'd developed our own language of gestures and glances. I missed that deep connection terribly. The twins bounded into the living room, breaking my reverie. "Grandma, will you read us a story?" Emma asked, climbing onto the sofa beside me. "Please?" Ethan added, already holding a stack of picture books. "I'd love to," I said, setting aside my wine glass. "Which one first?" By the time Melanie and Brian joined us, I was deep into The Paper Bag Princess, complete with different voices for each character. The twins were transfixed, and I was transported back to when Brian was small, curled against me as I read his favorite stories night after night. "You still do the dragon voice exactly the same," Brian observed from the doorway, a smile playing on his lips. "I used to think that was how all dragons talked." "This is the definitive dragon voice," I confirmed solemnly, accepted by dragon experts worldwide. After the story, Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma, can you come to my dance recital next week?" "I'm going to be a snowflake." "A snowflake?" I repeated, delighted. "How wonderful! Of course I'll come." I glanced at Melanie, suddenly uncertain. Was I overstepping? But she was nodding, her expression open. "It's on Saturday at 2, she confirmed, "at the community center. Nothing fancy, but the girls are excited." I wouldn't miss it, I promised. The evening ended with warm hugs from the twins and tentative ones from Brian and Melanie. As I drove home, I reflected on the subtle but significant shifts in our family dynamic. One dinner couldn't erase years of accumulated tension, but it felt like a promising beginning. My phone chimed with a text as I pulled into my driveway. It was from Martin. "Coffee tomorrow at 10? The cafe near the hospital has excellent croissants." I smiled, typing back, looking forward to it. The next few weeks unfolded with a pleasant rhythm I hadn't experienced since Jack's death. Tuesday and Thursday mornings at the Children's Hospital, reading to patients who quickly became beloved regulars. Coffee or lunch with Martin afterward, our conversations growing deeper and more personal each time. Monday evenings with the book club, Wednesday afternoons at the community center art class. Weekend visits with Brian's family, including Emma's adorable dance recital where she was indeed the most enchanting snowflake on stage. And through it all, a growing sense of my own identity beyond the roles of mother and grandmother. Kate called. One evening in late January, curious about the changes in my life. "You sound different," she observed. "Happier." I am happier, I realized. surprised by the simple truth of it. I'm busier than I've been in years, but it's a good kind of busy. Purposeful. And how are things with Brian and Melanie? Better, I said thoughtfully. Not perfect, but definitely improving. We're more honest with each other now, more direct. And the cruise? Did they still go? They're there now, actually. Melanie's parents took the twins for the week. They send photos every day. Brian on a jet ski, Melanie learning to snorkel. They seem to be having a wonderful time. Are you okay with that? Kate asked carefully. After everything that happened, I considered the question. Was I okay with it? With them enjoying a luxury vacation that had once been partially funded by my credit card? That had been the catalyst for our family conflict? Yes, I said, realizing. It was true. I'm genuinely happy for them. They needed that time together, away from responsibilities. And more importantly, they found a way to make it happen that didn't involve taking advantage of me. Well, Kate laughed, you've certainly come a long way from Christmas Day. I'm proud of you, little sister. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, enjoying the crisp winter air. My phone pinged with a message from Patty. Senior center dance on Friday. Big band music, punch, the works. You in? I hesitated, remembering how much Jack and I had loved dancing. We weren't particularly good at it. Jack had 2 left feet and I had no sense of rhythm, but we'd enjoyed it nonetheless, laughing our way through missteps and collisions. Bring that English professor of yours, Patty added in a second text, followed by a winking emoji. I felt myself blush like a teenager. Martin and I had been spending a lot of time together, but we hadn't defined our relationship, hadn't ventured beyond friendship into romance. At our age, with our histories, we were both cautious about new attachments. He's not my English professor, I texted back. Yet, came Patty's immediate response. I laughed, shaking my head at her persistence. But the idea of dancing with Martin, of allowing myself to explore that potential connection, was both frightening and exhilarating. I'll ask him, I replied. Martin said yes immediately. I haven't danced in years, he admitted when I called. Not since my wife passed. But I'd love to try again. With you. The senior center was transformed for the dance. The fluorescent lights dimmed and replaced with string lights that cast a warm glow over the space. A local band, retirees themselves, played standards from the 40s and 50s. Couples of DLs, all ages, filled the dance floor, from spry octogenarians to middle-aged children accompanying their elderly parents. Martin looked distinguished in a navy blazer and gray slacks, his silver hair neatly combed. You look beautiful, he said when he arrived, handing me a small corsage of white roses. You didn't have to, I protested, touched by the old-fashioned gesture. I wanted to, he replied simply. We danced every slow number, moving carefully around the floor. Martin was a surprisingly good dancer, guiding me with gentle pressure on my waist, anticipating my movements. By the 3rd song, we'd found our rhythm, swaying in perfect synchronization. This is nice, I murmured, allowing myself to relax against him. Very nice, he agreed, his voice warm beside my ear. Later, as we sat at a small table sharing a slice of cake, Martin reached for my hand. Eleanor, I've been meaning to ask you something. My heart fluttered nervously. Yes? My daughter and her family have invited me to Sunday dinner next week. Would you like to join us? Meet them? Meeting his family. It was a significant step. An acknowledgement that whatever was developing between us had potential, substance. It had been so long since I'd had to navigate the complex terrain of new relationships. I'd be honored, I said, squeezing his hand. But are you sure they won't mind? An unexpected guest? They've been hearing about you for weeks, Martin admitted with a smile. Amanda, that's my daughter, practically insisted I bring you. She says she needs to approve of the woman who's made her father start combing his hair again. I laughed, picturing a female version of Martin giving me the once-over. Well, in that case, how can I refuse? Walking me to my car after the dance, Martin hesitated, then leaned in and placed a gentle kiss on my cheek. "Good night, Eleanor," he said softly. "Good night, Martin," I replied, my skin tingling where his lips had touched. As I drove home, my thoughts drifted to Jack, not with grief or longing, but with a sense of peaceful remembrance. He would have approved of Martin, I decided. Would have been glad I wasn't spending my remaining years alone. And he would have been proud of me for finally standing up for myself with Brian and Melanie, for refusing to be the convenient doormat any longer. Jack had always seen more strength in me than I recognized in myself. "You were right, my love," I whispered to his memory. I did have it in me all along. Meeting Martin's family was nothing like I expected. I'd prepared myself for polite scrutiny, perhaps some protective questioning, from his daughter Amanda. Instead, I was welcomed with immediate warmth and genuine curiosity. Amanda, tall like her father, with the same kind eyes, hugged me at the door. "Dad hasn't stopped talking about you," she whispered as she took my coat. "It's been driving us crazy." Their home was modest but inviting, filled with books and musical instruments. Amanda's husband, Michael, a high school music teacher, played piano while their teenage sons argued good-naturedly about a board game in the corner. The scene was chaotic, noisy, and wonderfully alive. "So you're a school librarian?" Amanda asked, as we helped ourselves to dinner, a casual buffet of homemade lasagna and salad. "Retired now," I clarified. "But yes, for 30 years. "Dad says you volunteer at Children's Memorial," Michael joined in. "Our older son Liam spent a week there when he was 9. Appendicitis. The volunteers made all the difference. It's the most rewarding thing I've done in years," I admitted. "Though I'm still learning the ropes." "Mom was awesome at Children's," Liam offered unexpectedly. "She stayed with me every night, even though she had to work the next day. And she never cried until she thought I was asleep." Amanda's eyes softened. "You knew about that, huh?" "I always knew when you were upset," her son said with a shrug. "Still do." The simple exchange revealed volumes about their relationship, the mutual awareness, the unspoken understanding. I felt a twinge of envy, wondering if Brian was equally attuned to my feelings, if he'd ever noticed when I concealed my hurt for his sake. As the evening progressed, I found myself sharing stories I hadn't told in years. About my childhood in Tennessee. About meeting Jack at a county fair when I was 19. About the early years of raising Brian in a tiny apartment where we could hear the upstairs neighbor's television through the ceiling. "And now you have grandchildren," Amanda said, refilling my wine glass. "Twins, right?" "Emma and Ethan," I confirmed. "They're 4 going on 40. So serious sometimes, then suddenly pure chaos." "The perfect age," Martin commented. "Old enough for real conversations. Young enough for magic still to be real." "They sound wonderful," Amanda said sincerely. "You'll have to bring pictures next time." Next time. The casual assumption that there would be more evenings like this, that I was now part of their ongoing story, filled me with quiet joy. Later, as Martin drove me home, he asked anxiously, "So, what did you think?" "They're lovely," I assured him. "All of them. You've raised a beautiful family, Martin." "They liked you too," he said, clearly relieved. "Amanda texted me while I was helping Michael with the dishes. Said you were exactly what I'd hoped for, and that I should not mess this up." I laughed, both flattered and amused by the daughter's protective instinct. "Sage advice." "Indeed," Martin agreed, reaching for my hand across the center console. "I intend to follow it carefully." When Brian and Melanie returned from their cruise, tanned and visibly more relaxed, they invited me for an impromptu dinner to share photos and stories. The twins were still with Melanie's parents for 2 more days, so it was just the three of us, something that had rarely happened before. "Look at this one," Brian said, scrolling to a photo of Melanie parasailing above turquoise waters. She was terrified at first, but then loved it. "I screamed the entire time," Melanie admitted with a laugh. "The instructor thought I was having a medical emergency." They looked happier than I'd seen them in years. More connected, more at ease with each other. The cruise, despite all the drama surrounding it, had clearly been good for their marriage. "I'm glad you had such a wonderful time," I said sincerely. "Mom," Brian said, his expression growing serious. "Before we show you more photos, I wanted to give you this." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $6,500, the exact amount of the original cruise payment. "I promised I'd pay you back," he said quietly. "I'm sorry it took all this to make me keep that promise." "Thank you," I said, tucking the check into my purse. "I appreciate it." "And I owe you an apology," Melanie added. "For Christmas. For a lot of things, really." She seemed genuinely contrite, her usual polish softened by what appeared to be real remorse. "We've all made mistakes," I acknowledged. "What matters is learning from them." "We've been talking a lot," Brian said, glancing at Melanie. "About how we've treated you, about changes we want to make going forward." "Like what?" I asked, curious about this newfound self-awareness. "Our starters, regular family dinners. Not just when we need something," Melanie said. "And holiday planning that includes everyone. No more last-minute exclusions." "My parents are coming for Easter," Brian added. "All of us, together. If that's all right with you?" The prospect of spending a holiday with Melanie's parents, especially her mother, whom I'd gathered was the primary source of Melanie's perfectionistic tendencies, was daunting. But it was also a meaningful gesture, an inclusion in the inner circle that had previously been closed to me. "I'd like that," I said. "Thank you." As we continued looking through their vacation photos, I shared some news of my own, about my volunteer work, the new friends I'd made, and with some hesitation, about Martin. "You're dating?" Brian looked stunned. "Like, actually dating someone?" "Yes," I confirmed, amused by his shock. "Like, actually dating." "Wow," he said, processing this information. That's great, Mom. Really. I just didn't expect." "That your old mother could still attract a suitor?" I teased. "No, that's not what I meant," he protested, flushing. "It's just, after Dad, you never seemed interested in meeting anyone else." "I wasn't for a long time," I acknowledged. "Grief takes its own path. But life goes on and sometimes offers unexpected gifts." "I'd like to meet him," Melanie said, surprising me with her enthusiasm. "Maybe he could join us for one of those regular family dinners we're planning?" "I'd like that," I said, touched by the invitation. "Though, fair warning, he's an English professor. He might correct your grammar over dessert." We laughed together, the sound filling Melanie's pristine kitchen with genuine warmth. Later that evening, as I prepared for bed, I received a text from Brian. "It was really good to see you tonight, Mom. I like this new version of you. More sure of yourself. Happier," I smiled, typing back. "I like her too. She's been here all along, just waiting for the right moment to emerge." February melted into March, bringing the first tentative signs of spring. Crocuses pushed through the soil in the community garden, where I'd claimed a small plot. The hospital playroom was decorated with paper flowers and butterflies made by the young patients. Martin and I took longer walks in the park as the days grew incrementally warmer. And on a bright Saturday morning, I woke to an unexpected text from Melanie. "The twins miss you. Any chance you're free today for a play date at the park? They've been practicing a surprise for you all week." 3 months ago, such a casual invitation would have been unthinkable. Now it felt natural, an extension of the new relationship we were carefully building. I'd love that, I replied. The park on Elm Street? 11 a.m.? Perfect, came Melanie's response. Don't forget your camera. It's going to be adorable. When I arrived at the park, the twins spotted me immediately, racing across the playground with unbridled excitement. Grandma! Grandma! They shouted in unison, hurling themselves into my arms. Careful, Melanie called, trailing behind them. You'll knock her over. But I was steadier than I looked, bracing myself for the impact of two enthusiastic 4-year-olds. I've got them, I assured her, hugging my grandchildren close. Now, what's this surprise I've been hearing about? Emma and Ethan exchanged mischievous glances. Should we show her? Emma asked her brother. Ethan nodded solemnly. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. They stepped back, struck dramatic poses, and launched into a carefully choreographed dance routine complete with twirls, jumps, and a synchronized bow at the end. It was charmingly imperfect, with Ethan consistently a half beat behind his sister, but their faces shone with pride. Bravo! I applauded when they finished. That was spectacular. We practiced every day, Emma informed me importantly. For when you're sad. I blinked, confused. For when I'm sad? Ethan nodded. Daddy said you were sad at Christmas because you were alone, so we made a happy dance for next time. My heart constricted. Out of all the complex emotions and difficult conversations of the past months, this was what had filtered down to the twins, that Grandma had been sad, and they wanted to make it better. That's the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And it worked perfectly. I'm not sad at all now. See? Emma nudged her brother triumphantly. I told you it would work. As the children ran off to the swings, Melanie sat beside me on the bench. Brian told them a simplified version of what happened, she explained, that we'd made a mistake that hurt your feelings. They've been concerned about you ever since. They're remarkable children, I said, watching them take turns pushing each other. They get that from you, Melanie said quietly. That empathy. Brian has it too. It was perhaps the most genuine compliment she'd ever given me. Not about my cooking or my appearance or some other superficial quality, but about the values I'd tried to instill in my son that had apparently been passed down to his children. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a lot. We sat in companionable silence, watching the twins play. Not quite friends yet, Melanie and I, but no longer adversaries. Fellow travelers on a journey neither of us had mapped out, but both were committed to navigating with greater care. As I drove home that afternoon, I thought about the twisting path that had led me here, from the pain of exclusion at Christmas to the joy of new beginnings in spring. None of it had been easy. Setting boundaries, speaking difficult truths, demanding respect. These were skills I'd never fully developed until necessity forced my hand. But the rewards had been immeasurable. Not just the restored relationship with Brian and his family, but the discovery of my own capacity for growth and change. At 67, I was building a life richer and more fulfilling than I could have imagined 6 months ago. The cruise payment that I'd canceled had been a catalyst, but the transformation had been set in motion long before, in every silent acceptance of disrespect, every boundary crossed without consequence, every sacrifice made without acknowledgement. The crisis had simply forced me to confront patterns that had become unsustainable. My phone pinged with a text from Martin. Thinking of you. Dinner tonight? I smiled, typing back an immediate, yes. Life, I was discovering, offers second chances. In the most unexpected ways. The trick is recognizing them when they appear, and having the courage to embrace them fully. Time passes differently when you're fully engaged in life. The months flew by in a blur of meaningful activity. Hospital, volunteer shifts, community garden harvests, book club discussions, and gradually deepening relationships. Martin and I settled into a comfortable rhythm, spending weekends together but maintaining our separate homes and independence. His family became an extension of mine, and mine of his, creating an interconnected web of caring that enriched us all. As November arrived, bringing a sharp chill to the air and the first whispers of the holiday season, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in a single year. Last November, I'd been anxiously planning my traditional Christmas dinner, clinging to rituals and expectations that had long since become hollow. I'd been living in a state of quiet acquiescence, accepting whatever scraps of attention my son's family offered, grateful for even the most perfunctory inclusion in their lives. Now, as I hung a fall wreath on my door and arranged chrysanthemums in a copper vase, I marveled at the woman I'd become, confident, engaged, surrounded by genuine connections that nourished rather than depleted me. My phone rang just as I was adjusting the flowers. Brian's name flashed on the screen. "Mom," he said when I answered, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Do you have a few minutes to talk? Something important." "Of course," I replied, settling onto my sofa. "Is everything all right?" Yes, everything's fine," he assured me. "It's about Christmas." My heart skipped a beat, old anxieties momentarily resurging. "What about Christmas?" "Melanie and I have been talking," he continued. "We want to do something different this year, something more meaningful for everyone." "Different how?" I asked, cautiously. "We thought maybe we could revive your traditional Christmas dinner at your place, like it used to be. If you'd want to host again, that is." The request caught me completely off guard. After last year's painful exclusion, after all the changes we'd navigated, they wanted to return to the tradition I'd maintained for decades. "You don't have to answer right away," Brian added quickly, misinterpreting my silence. "We just thought it might be a nice way to acknowledge everything that's happened, to show you that things really have changed." "Who would be there?" I asked, still processing the idea. "Just us. Me, Melanie, the twins. And if you'd like to invite Martin, that would be great too. We'd love to get to know him better." No mention of Melanie's parents. No pressure to accommodate outside expectations. Just our immediate family, plus the new addition to my life. "I'd need to think about it," I said honestly. "It's been a while since I hosted a big holiday meal." "Of course," Brian said, his tone understanding. "Take all the time you need, and if you'd rather not, that's completely fine too. We can figure out something else." After we hung up, I sat with the invitation, examining my feelings. There was a time when I would have jumped at the chance to reclaim my role as holiday hostess, desperate to reestablish my place in the family hierarchy. But now, with my life so richly populated with diverse relationships and activities, the prospect felt different, not a lifeline, but a choice to be carefully considered. I called Martin to get his perspective. "What do you want to do?" he asked. After I explained the situation. "Not what you think you should want, or what would make Brian happy. What would make you happiest this Christmas?" It was exactly the right question, one that focused on my genuine desires rather than external expectations. "Honestly," I said after reflection, "I'd love to host Christmas again. Not out of obligation or to prove anything, but because I miss the joy of it, the preparation, the festivity, the sense of creating something special for people I love." "Then that's your answer," Martin said warmly, "and I'd be honored to be included." That evening, I called Brian back. "I've thought about your idea," I told him. "I'd love to host Christmas dinner this year." "Really?" The relief in his voice was palpable. "That's wonderful, Mom. Thank you." "With one condition," I added. "Name it," he said immediately. "I want us to create some new traditions alongside the old ones. This isn't about going backward, pretending nothing changed. It's about moving forward together, honoring our history while creating something new. I couldn't agree more, Brian said, his voice thick with emotion. That's exactly what we want too. The weeks leading up to Christmas were filled with joyful preparation. I dusted off my recipe cards, modified some dishes to accommodate modern tastes, and added new ones suggested by Melanie during our planning conversations. The twins helped me decorate my small condo, stringing popcorn garlands and hanging ornaments on a modest tree that seemed to grow more beautiful with each child-placed bauble. Martin contributed his family's tradition of Christmas crackers, handmade, from colorful paper and filled with personalized jokes and tiny gifts. Melanie surprised me by asking for cooking lessons, admitting she'd always been intimidated by my holiday specialties, but wanted to learn. My mother never let me help in the kitchen, she confessed, as we prepared cranberry relish together. Said, I just messed things up, so I never learned the basics, and then it became easier to pretend I wasn't interested than to admit I didn't know how. My mother was the same way, I shared, realizing we had more in common than I'd ever recognized. I taught myself most of what I know from library books after I married Jack. These moments of connection, small, honest exchanges without pretense or competition, built a foundation far stronger than our previous polite distance ever had. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight sparkling on fresh snow that had fallen overnight. I woke early, savoring the quiet as I sipped coffee and watched cardinals at my bird feeder. Martin would arrive around noon to help with final preparations. Brian's family was coming at 2, allowing time for the twins to open Santa's gifts. At home first, everything was ready. The turkey resting in its roasting pan, sides prepared and waiting to be heated. The dining table extended and set with my grandmother's china, polished silver, and crystal glasses I hadn't used in years, not out of a need to impress, but because beauty and care are ways of honoring those we love. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. When I opened it, I found my family standing there, Brian with an armload of gifts, Melanie holding a gorgeous poinsettia plant, the twins bouncing with excitement in their holiday outfits. Merry Christmas, Mom, Brian said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Grandma, Santa came, Emma announced, twirling to show off her new dress. And we brought you presents too. The best present is having you all here, I said, ushering them inside where Martin waited, dressed in a festive sweater and bearing a tray of hot cider. The day unfolded with a relaxed joy I hadn't experienced in years. We exchanged gifts, played games, shared stories. The twins performed an expanded version of their happy dance, now including Martin in the choreography. Brian and Melanie moved through my space with easy familiarity, helping without, taking over, present without hovering. When we finally gathered around the table for dinner, Brian stood to offer a toast. To Mom, he said, raising his glass, for teaching us what family really means, not just showing up for the easy parts, but doing the hard work of honest communication and genuine forgiveness. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we deserved it. And to new beginnings, Martin added, his hand finding mine under the table, and the courage it takes to create them. As we ate and talked and laughed together, I thought about the long, winding path that had brought us to this moment. How a painful exclusion had sparked a necessary confrontation. How a canceled cruise payment had forced long overdue honesty. How standing up for myself had ultimately strengthened, not severed, my most important relationships. The evening ended with the twins falling asleep on my sofa, their faces peaceful in the glow of Christmas lights. As Brian gently bundled them into their coats for the drive home, Melanie hung back. I wanted to thank you, she said quietly, for giving us another chance, for showing me what it looks like to set boundaries without building walls. We're all learning together, I said, embracing her with genuine affection. That's what family is. After they left, Martin helped me with the dishes, working companionably side by side in comfortable silence. When we finished, we sat together on the sofa, watching the lights twinkle on the tree. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around my shoulders. "Very," I confirmed, though not in the way I would have expected a year ago. "The best happiness rarely comes in the package we expect," he observed. "That's what makes it so precious when we find it." Looking around my small, warm home, at the signs of the day's celebration, at the man beside me, at the photos of my expanded circle of loved ones displayed on my mantel, I knew he was right. True happiness comes not from clinging to what we think we're entitled to, but from the courage to release expectations and embrace the unexpected gifts that emerge when we stand firmly in our own worth. That Christmas taught me that the most powerful gift we can give ourselves is the refusal to accept less than we deserve. Sometimes that means canceling a cruise payment. Sometimes it means walking away from a toxic situation. And sometimes, miraculously, it means creating space for genuine transformation in ourselves and in those we love. Not everyone gets a second chance at a relationship worth having. I consider myself fortunate that my stand for self-respect led not to permanent estrangement, but to authentic reconciliation. But even if it hadn't, even if Brian and Melanie had never recognized the need for change, I would still have found my way to joy. Because the most important relationship I rebuilt that year was the one with myself. That knowledge that I am complete and worthy, with or without external validation, is the true gift I received when my daughter-in-law banned me from Christmas dinner and I found the courage to say no more. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.